The Ranger class in Dungeons & Dragons and in most tabletop RPGs has been the pinnacle of fantasy. We all have had dreams of our characters trekking through the woods and noticing small details in cracked branches and tracks on the ground as we get closer and closer to our goal or foes, who use their wit, knowledge, and abilities as a fighter to best their foes in combat. Now, me personally, I have always had a strong connection to the Ranger class. I grew up in eastern Pennsylvania, where at a young age I learned the skills of hunting and fishing. It is very common in this area to have, say, deer meat or elk meat sold in stores. It was always a special treat when I got some venison jerky or turkey jerky. So growing up in this area, being exposed to this hunter culture, the Ranger class has always been near and dear to my heart. In fact, let me show you something. A little dusty, but you can get the idea. I've kept this actually since I was 16. This is my Robin Hood that I did when I was 16. I was quite the marksman back then. I'm no longer am I this good of a marksman. You could see where the target point came through there at the end. But yes, so I was a ranger when I was a kid. So you can see that I have like a personal investment into this class. Reading the 2014 5th edition Player's Handbook, I always felt like the Ranger had great flavor in the original 5th edition handbook. Now, we've come to find over the past 10 years and using the Ranger class that the flavor that was in the original 5th edition handbook did not translate into gameplay. They had complicated skills for picking a favored land and a favored enemy, and they just really didn't, like, they were fun to read, and they read really well, and they had a ton of flavor, but it just didn't translate really well throughout gameplay. It wasn't used that often, didn't add much to the class, and it just kind of became an afterthought. So when the new rulebook came out, the 2024 Player's Handbook for 5.5, the new edition of 5th edition, whatever you want to call it, they removed a lot of that from the Ranger. And I want to start by saying that they did some good things with the Ranger in the new 2024 Player's Handbook. One of the things that they did really, really well is they made Rangers feel like the half-casters that they were kind of built to be. You get spell casting at level 1 now, and then likewise you also get this spell, this signature spell, that's kind of supposed to represent the Ranger as it functions as you play the class. And that, of course, is Hunter's Mark. Now, I feel like they missed the mark on this a little bit. See what I did there? So they did an overhaul of the class, but they didn't follow all the way through. There's no problem with having a class having a signature defining spell or ability. If you see, the Warlock does this very well with Eldritch Blast. No one complains really that Eldritch Blast is not a good ability or not a good skill to build around. But certainly with the Ranger, there's been a lot of controversy online about how they did the Ranger dirty in the new 2024 Player's Handbook, that the Ranger is just doesn't feel like a Ranger. It doesn't have the power level of the other classes, the other martial classes. It's sitting in this weird spot where it's half of a martial class, half of a spellcaster, but it doesn't do either one particularly well. Now, before I get into the changes that I made to fix the Ranger class, I want to talk about the philosophy that I had in making these changes. Now, again, coming from this hunting culture that exists in the northeastern United States, I have strong opinions about the fantasy that surrounds the Ranger. And one of the common threads that you can see if you meet a bunch of different people who hunt, maybe they hunt for their family, or maybe they hunt for sport, these people that live their lives around, hunting season and tracking and hunting these animals to feed their family. One of the common threads, there are many common threads between them. The first thing is they always have their special spots. They always have that opening in the woods that they've successfully hunted before. They had that special clearing, that special blind that they have set aside that no one knows about. They have that friend who has 20 acres of land that lets them hunt on their property. Additionally, another thing is they all have their special tricks that help them be successful in their hunt. This may be donning certain scents or wearing certain clothes, certain colors, using a particular call, or all these different techniques for the particular animal that they're hunting. They have a sound strategy based on experience that they enact. The way that I most think the 2024 Player's Handbook failed the Ranger is not necessarily in class balance or power, but it's more so that the Ranger just kind of doesn't feel like a Ranger anymore. We have this ability, this Hunter's Mark, that we're supposed to use. Many of our class features revolve around this ability. However, it just doesn't hit very well. It's clunky to use inside combat. It doesn't really add a significant amount of damage once you start to get above, say, level 6, 7, or 8. And then it really just doesn't take off until you get to level 20 and you get that D10. Woo! So when I set out to fix the Ranger in 2024, the thing I wanted to capture is hunters have all of this hidden and gain knowledge throughout their lives through experience of tracking and hunting certain animals, and they're really good at it. They gain abilities, they gain the strength, their hunting abilities over time through successes and failures. And I wanted to capture this. I also wanted to just make Hunter's Mark a better ability. It doesn't make sense that, say for example, there's a Paladin subclass out there that gets Hunter's Mark. It's fine that other classes get another class's signature spell, that's fine. But if I use my signature spell, I should be better at using my signature spell better than you are. You can use my spell, but I'm really good at using my spell. And it's not just that I get free 2 casts or 3 casts of it every long rest. So how are we going to fix this? There are 2 things that we are trying to fix with the Ranger. And that is the flavor of the Ranger, because they basically gutted all the flavor from Favorite Enemy and just gave us 2 free casts of Hunter's Mark, which is cool, but it just doesn't feel Ranger-like when you're kind of pigeonholed into using your bonus action on this mediocre spell. So there's a lack of flavor, and then there's a lack of usability of Hunter's Mark. And we're going to try to solve both of those issues with the several changes that we made to the Ranger class, starting from level 1 and as you move and progress through the Ranger class. Now, in order to represent the knowledge that hunters gain throughout the experience that they gain through tracking and hunting various animals, and also to represent the common knowledge sharing that happens in the hunter community between handbooks and almanacs, printing different techniques that you can read up on and learn strategies on how to hunt better certain animals. I represented that in the Ranger class by creating a level 1 ability called Tracker's Handbook. And this Tracker's Handbook is going to be your helper throughout all your travels. You always carry with you a personal Tracker's Handbook. This is your handbook where you're going to write down all of the experience that you gain when you track and hunt certain creatures in the game, and your prowess in combat against foes that you have seen and make notes on are heightened as you recall vital data in your notes. You're going to be tracking creatures, hunting them with your Hunter's Mark, and then you're going to learn about them and write notes in your Tracker's Handbook. Now I know what you're thinking, but DDA, this increases the bookkeeping for my players. And you're right, it does. But we need something that gives Rangers back its flavor. And being that Rangers are half-casters, my first thought was, well, they mostly removed the need for spell books in 2024 Player's Handbook. Let's kind of bring back a little bit more of that bookkeeping just for flavor. the good thing about this ability is there is a point where the bookkeeping is going to stop. There is a point where you're going to have notes on every creature type, and then you're no longer going to need to think about it. You're just going to get all these abilities. And the Tracker's Handbook is there to enhance your Hunter's Mark. Basically, it has 3 separate abilities, and for each specific creature type, you're going to play this mini game of where you unlock abilities by doing a certain task against that creature type. And of course, this uses text that you'll be familiar with from the old favored enemy that splits the creature types out into certain categories, such as celestials, constructs, dragons, elementals. This is the text that is straight from the old favored enemy ability from 2014. We're bringing that back, and we are updating it with tons and tons of power and flavor. So one of the problems with Hunter's Mark is that it takes a bonus action for you to cast it, and then additionally, it takes a bonus action for you to move the darn thing around. And I don't think this really represents what a hunter really does. The thing that a hunter does is he has a lot of preparation, and then when whatever he is hunting, or whatever he or she is hunting, comes into his or her area, then they are prepared to hunt that animal. It is not very taxing action-wise. The hunter already knows what it's going to do. And I wanted to represent that in the upgraded Hunter's Mark because the Ranger should be using Hunter's Mark better than any other class. So being kind of limited by bonus actions, after you have successfully hunted a creature type by using your Hunter's Mark and then defeating that creature type, you then get an upgraded form of moving the Hunter's Mark, but from creature to creature, by using a free action instead of a bonus action. So this is a straight upgrade from the original text of the Hunter's Mark. Hunter's Mark, you can do this same ability by moving it with a bonus action. This simply gives you added utility of creatures that you have already hunted. Well, now you can move the Hunter's Mark as a free action and save your bonus action for another ability or trick during combat. The other thing that I wanted to address was Hunter's Mark's low damage. It's only a D6 until you get to level 20, and then it becomes a D10. Just really, really low numbers coming out here from the signature spell of the Ranger. Why? This is our signature spell. We should be upgrading it. We should be upgrading it before level 20. So if you study the creature type and you succeed at an investigation check, studying the creature either from afar or after you have defeated the creature, and you can make this harder as a DM if you want to make it a skill challenge. You can make it a skill challenge, but I didn't want to have it be overly wordy. Just a skill check will suffice. But then, in order to increase the damage and consistency of Hunter's Mark, after you fight against a creature that you have studied, you get to roll 2 damage dice and choose the result of the damage from your Hunter's Mark. This will just increase the average damage of your Hunter's Mark and get even better when you get that D10. Now, the other thing I mentioned earlier that I wanted to represent was Hunter's preparation and abilities to have long-range combat against the foes that they are very familiar with. And that's what I wanted to represent with this final ability. And also, something about tracking creatures in this game, it can be very relevant depending on the campaign, the adventure, and the DM, setting up scenarios for you to actually be able to track the creatures. That's important. But sometimes it becomes an afterthought, and I really wanted to reward characters for playing the class the way that you're supposed to play the class. Now, Hunter's Mark itself gives advantage on survival checks or perception checks that are looking for the creature that you have under the effects of your Hunter's Mark. So it's going to be really easy for you to complete this task of succeeding a survival check, tracking the enemy. After you succeed in that, then your Hunter's Mark is going to get a range of 150 feet against that creature type. Now, Hunter's Mark already has a range of 90 feet, which makes it pretty far. However, most ranged weapons can be used way far away compared to 90 feet. What I wanted to do with this ability was I wanted to give Rangers an ability to use Hunter's Mark outside of combat and sort of represent that setup phase that Hunters have against enemies that they are well trained against and know very well. Well, now you get 150 feet. You can use Hunter's Mark even before the combat begins, way back against the creature, and that way it sets you up and it frees up your bonus action during combat to either move around the Hunter's Mark or just do something else. Now, the original favorite enemy had built-in ways that you could add humanoid races to your favorite enemy. You got to choose 2 humanoid races if you chose that as your favorite enemy. The way I represented that here, I didn't want them to start the game being able to track everything in the game. Humanoids are a very common type, and then likewise, typically your big bad is a humanoid. So I wanted to really limit the Ranger's ability to fight humanoids and show that only experienced Rangers would be able to learn the weaknesses and patterns of a humanoid. So the way I did that was at level 9, then you can additionally add humanoids to your Tracker's Handbook, basically allowing you to track anything with your Tracker's Handbook, and against any creature type, you can use this upgraded Hunter's Mark. Now, the other most common thing that Rangers have an issue with the new player's handbook is the Hunter's Mark ability requires concentration. And it's really great that at level 13, the concentration can't break, but you're a Ranger anyway. You should be pretty far, so you shouldn't be getting hit that often to begin with. It kind of feels like a lackluster ability, especially for level 13 at that point. You've invested so much into Ranger, and you're standing back, fighting from afar. Why is it that now I get this very minor upgrade to my Hunter's Mark? No, let's upgrade it the way that everyone wants it to be upgraded, which is Hunter's Mark no longer requires concentration. There's no reason for us to have damage not break Hunter's Mark. This is our signature ability, and if you invest heavily into Ranger, you should be rewarded with your signature spell becoming very powerful and usable. Now, as a final closure to how we are upgrading the Ranger class, most of this was early game and mid game abilities that we were giving for flavor and the usability of Hunter's Mark. Well, as a closer here to kind of just really bring it home here for the Ranger, if you read some of the other level 20 abilities from the other classes, it's insane the level of power that they get. Rogues can just get a free 20 on any roll that they want. Bards get the 2 most powerful spells in the game, always prepared, and they get to double up on their casts of those power word heal and power word kill spells. All the classes in the game get insane abilities at level 20, except Ranger. We get a D10 on our Hunter's Mark. Get out of here. Well, don't get out of here. Please give me that D10. I need it. But give me more. Give me more. So that's why we're additionally giving, in addition to the D10 on the Hunter's Mark, we are also getting one of their 2 key signature abilities. You get Always Prepared, and you get to cast them once per day without expending a spell slot. So this reinforces that Rangers are meant to be casters, and you're usually going to want these spells anyway. Known spells, prepared spells are very limited for the Ranger. This can free up your prepared spells, so that way you can have other cool abilities in those final slots, and you don't have to put Conjure Volley and put Steel Wind Strike in there. You can use your signature spells, but also have the prepared spells available for you to do other cool utility-based things in addition to these really powerful damaging spells. We already started with a signature spell at level 1. It just makes sense for us to have signature spells at level 20 that define the Ranger class. So I hope you all enjoy the way that I personally have fixed Ranger in the 2024, adding flavor and usability of Hunter's Mark. I'm a new forever DM, and I'm running several games already, and I plan on expanding and coming out with a ton of homebrew for Dungeons & Dragons. and potentially Pathfinder. So if you like this video, please hit that subscribe button for future Dungeons & Dragons homebrew and content. And as always, turn your dial to Random Number Gaming for the best gaming content and guides.